It is my pleasure to introduce Craig Richmond, our new President and CEO of Vancouver Airport Authority. Born in Vancouver and raised in Kamloops, Craig Richmond returns to YVR as the Airport Authority's new President and CEO. With a breadth of international airport experience and leadership skills that will serve the future development of our award-winning airport. Craig will oversee the effective operation and strategic vision for the future of YVR, Canada's second busiest airport and a key global gateway on North America's west coast. He will be responsible for leading an approach designed to keep the airport competitive, a community contributor, and key economic generator for British Columbia. Craig's early introduction to aviation came when, at age 13, he took his first job as a gas jockey for propeller aircraft at Kamloops Airport. Craig earned his pilot's license, taking to the skies before he even learned to drive a car, which may explain why Craig is taking the train to work every day. Nothing to do with that. I assume we did get a driver's license at some point. we'll let Craig cover that off. Between 1980 and 1990, Craig piloted fighter jets as a Canadian Armed Forces military pilot. Educated at the University of Manitoba, Craig holds both a bachelor's degree and a master's in business administration. Craig joined Vancouver Airport Authority in 1995 and spent more than 11 years in various operational roles, including manager airside operations and vice president operations. During his tenure as VP, Craig oversaw the safe and efficient movement of millions of passengers, including those diverted to YVR in the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. He championed airline safety, including the introduction of the first radar debris detection system to a commercial airport, led strategic planning and community consultation for major changes to runway operations, and spearheaded improvements to YVR's world-renowned customer service. Craig also served as the organization's lead spokesperson during crisis and issue response. In 2006, Craig joined Vantage Airport Group, taking his management excellence and operational expertise to airports around the world. A 4-year term as president and CEO of NASA Airport Development Company yielded international experience for Craig, who oversaw planning and delivery of a $409 million terminal redevelopment project. As CEO of 3 airports in Northern England, Craig applied his expertise in operations in transition, and in a double recession, Craig cut operational costs, bolstered non-aeronautical revenue, and implemented leading e-commerce, customer service, and social media strategies to improve the airport experience. Prior to accepting his dream job in Vancouver, Craig most recently served as CEO of Larnaca International and Paphos International Airports in Cyprus. Please join me in welcoming Craig to the stage.
Wow, it's a full house. Thank you, Phil. I'm tremendously pleased to be able to make my inaugural speech to the business community at today's Vancouver Board of Trade Luncheon. I'm also honored to be carrying on a long-standing tradition of YVR CEOs addressing the Board of Trade. In fact, as Ian and others have mentioned, the Board of Trade appoints a member to our community-based Board of Directors, and VBOT was one of the original architects and strong proponents of the Airport Authority. I remember sitting in this audience and listening to some of the first speeches made by David Emerson and then Larry Berg after him back when the new terminal was a dream, the new runway was a hope, and the new airport improvement fee was somewhat less popular than a Harley on a bike path. At this very moment, some 14,000 commercial aircraft are in the air all over the world, carrying about 3 million passengers, none of whom will have to sit through my speech. On the other hand, you had a better lunch, so I think we're even. And rather than inundate you with pie charts and bar graphs, I thought I would shake it up a bit. Today I'm going to be a storyteller, and I will relate some very interesting stories that illustrate wonderfully why YVR matters to people, products, and businesses of BC. Before I start these stories, let's go back, because I'm new to the job, and let's think back to the start, the beginning of the Airport Authority. Do you remember the old airport? It wasn't a pretty picture, but through a great new government policy, it got turned around. Now, this is something we as Canadians are not very good at or used to, heaping praise on government policies. But in this case, we should, because the national airports policy of the early 90s has turned out to be a roaring success. From Halifax to Fort St. John, Winnipeg to Cranbrook, Moncton to Vancouver, Canada has airports to be proud of. The key building blocks of the policy: independent airport authorities were created. No longer would airports be funded by taxpayer dollars, but rather they'd be self-funding entities. There'd be no shareholders. Rather, all the money earned by the airport authorities would be reinvested back into the infrastructure of the airports. The result is what you see today: an economically sustainable, self-funding airport authority model, whose main mandate is to connect the people and products of Canada to the world, thereby creating jobs, powerful economic impact, and a competitive edge. Now, this is not my opinion alone. In 2013, the World Economic Forum just rated Canada #1 in the world in terms of airport infrastructure. And this is written right into our Articles of Incorporation to create economic activity. And one important note, for the record, once again, unfortunately probably not for the last time, we are not a government department, nor are we a Crown corporation. We are a not-for-profit private company, and not only do we not receive government funding, I'm going to repeat that, we do not receive government funding. We actually send rent to Ottawa, about $40 million last year. So the federal government did a great thing for Canadian airports and the citizens they serve when it created the National Airports Policy. I should also give a shout out to our friends and partners at NAV Canada, our air traffic controllers, who are the best in the business and who also were a privatized company. Since this change of management in 1992, much has been improved. We built award-winning terminals in Canada's first Category 3 runway. We've seen passenger growth accelerate from 10 million in 1992 to almost 18 million in 2012. And this year we might get over that. We've helped increase jobs from 14,000 in 1992 to more than 23,000 today, and won 4 consecutive awards for Best Airport in North America as voted by our passengers. And this Canadian model not only works, it's spun itself off even into the for-profit airport sector. I just got back to Vancouver from the grand opening of the final phase of the International and Domestic Terminal in Nassau, Bahamas last Thursday, a huge project for the islands that started back in 2006. The Nassau Airport is managed by our associate company, Vantage Airport Group, headquartered here in Vancouver, and operating 10 other airports in Canada, Europe, and the Caribbean. I spent a few great years in Nassau myself. And Vantage is a true YVR and British Columbia success story. It was created to export Vancouver Airport Authority's airport know-how globally. So not only do we help facilitate the export of BC goods, we're actually an export ourselves. Nassau's new terminal is ultra-modern and sophisticated, but the icing on the cake is how it reflects unique Bahamian art and architecture, a sense of place. And that's an idea we pioneered here at YVR. The Nassau Airport is also an example of how Vantage creates jobs here in BC as well. The terminal was designed by the renowned BC architectural firm Stantec and built by one of Western Canada's largest construction companies, Ledcor. So it's been 22 years since the Airport Authority began running YVR, and much has changed. And now I would say it's time for another change, a step change, if you will, a change as powerful as that which got us into this airport game in the first place. Although the style of my talk today will be a little bit different, I will keep with the tradition that David and Larry had, and that's the big ask. So here it comes. It's really quite simple. Let the YVR team compete freely on the global stage. Let us deliver on the great promise of the National Airports Policy. That means 3 specific things that we need from the federal government. Open up more air service bilaterals with other countries. Keep up your end of the bargain with CATSA and the screening of passengers. And remove barriers to trade by simplifying the visa process. To repeat, open up the bilaterals, properly fund or make more efficient passenger screening, and simplify the visa process. Do these 3 things, YVR will deliver on its mandate, bringing more passenger choice, more growth, and more jobs to BC. I'll come back to these points throughout today's stories, so let's begin. Let me introduce you to the Okanagan Cherry, as well as Mike, our road warrior, Nalini, Thompson River University's newest international student, and Mr. and Mrs. Ho, tourists to BC. The first story I'm going to tell you stars a local fan favorite and the subject of your dessert, the BC Cherry. So what does the delicious fruit from the Okanagan have to do with YVR? Quite a bit, as it turns out. The airport plays a key role in a supply chain which connects BC food with global markets. In fact, The BC cherry leaves the tree first thing one morning and arrives on the table in Hong Kong the next day, from tree to table in about 24 hours. An interesting fact, BC cherries are the last to ripen in North America, which means they're available for autumn harvest festival celebrations in China. And ripe cherries with green stems represent good luck and are often given as gifts. The cherries are picked early in the morning to prevent the heat of the day from damaging the fruit. They're then washed, sorted, graded, and packaged, in this case by some 260 employees at the Jealous Fruits operation, love that name, or any of the several dozen other packaging operations in the Okanagan. It's the very best of the fruit that gets put on a truck, like the one operated by Vern Trucking Industries, and transported to YVR's cargo facilities later in the afternoon. Freight forwarders like Martin Regan at Kuhn and Nagel know how to handle delicate and perishable products. It's their job to get these valuable commodities ready for long international flights. And as the sun goes down at YVR, the fruit takes off. It's not uncommon for BC cherries to fetch $20 a kilogram abroad compared to $3 a kilogram here at home. Just this year, China and Canada reached an agreement that opens the vast Chinese market to Okanagan cherries. Next year, BC growers expect to sell $10 million worth of cherries to China alone, with that number doubling by 2015. This means jobs at the airport and jobs in the Okanagan. So the star of the food export story today might be cherries, but this is just part of the total picture. BC exports close to $1 billion in seafood annually to more than 70 countries. Much of the crab, geoducks, prawns, salmon, and other products from the sea from BC move by air. In fact, the lunch we just enjoyed featured some of these high-value prized products that get shipped through YVR. Some $70 million worth of mushrooms also make the trip from YVR each year. The most expensive mushroom in the world, the matsutake or pine mushroom, grows wild in the forests around Terrace, fetching up to $100 per kilogram in Japan. But whatever the product, timing is crucial. The supply chain for perishable food needs to work completely in concert, with each cog interconnecting so the entire system moves without breaks in timing. We created a model representing this thinking as your centerpiece today. We did some research to see how our airport operations could somehow better support this system, and we found out, to our surprise, that our summer runway maintenance program could create a supply chain vulnerability. When our longest runway is closed for routine summer safety checks, airplanes have to take off on our shorter runway. Because it's hotter, aircraft may then have to lighten their loads in order to take off. And it's the belly cargo, the perishables, that get loaded last and that sometimes get left behind. So we need to know when cherries are in the pipeline. As part of this process, YVR recently joined the BC Cherry Growers Association to ensure our operations support a timely tree-to-table journey for cherries and other BC perishables. We're also looking at the length of the North Runway and whether or not it needs to be extended. Stay tuned. But just as important as a fast journey to market is the number of markets we can reach. Here's a fact that surprised me when I first arrived back in the summer. YVR offers more weekly flights to China, 75 in the summer peak, than any other airport in North America. 75. That's 12 more flights than LAX and almost twice as many flights as Toronto. In addition to Beijing, Shanghai, and Hong Kong, our airline partners offer service to Guangzhou, Chengdu, and Shenyang. But we want to build connectivity with even more secondary markets in China. Now, these are secondary markets, cities that have between 3 to 9 million people each. Today's long-range aircraft make nonstop service to anywhere in China, and indeed all of Southeast Asia, possible from YVR. But here's the catch. While cargo in the belly of an aircraft helps to make a flight commercially viable, you need passengers in the cabin to sustain ongoing scheduled service. And BC does not have the market size to support a simple back-and-forth service between Vancouver and cities such as Xiamen, Wuhan, and Hangzhou. But if Vancouver serves as an intermediary point between China and cities in the US and South America, now that combination of markets makes the service viable. Our goal? We want to be China's connection to all the Americas. Open up the market and we'll bring hundreds of jobs. We'll create routes for BC cherries through Santiago, Chile. We'll bring opportunities for mining companies to fly directly to their sites in South America. And this is not a pipe dream. We have airlines lined up to fly between China and Latin America. Why? Because from any point in Western Latin America, flying through YVR is the shortest route to Asia. So if you add our geographic advantage to BC's elimination of the aviation fuel tax, thank you very much to the provincial government, by the way, and to our leading edge systems, and you've got a recipe for success. To make this a reality, We need the government to allow transit without visa between China and South America. That's it. Just the permission to get it done. We don't need loan guarantees, we don't need capital or even expertise. We have that. We just need the opportunity. Give it to us and we'll see hundreds more jobs and direct flights to South America that would not otherwise exist. So cherries, one of BC's most revered exports, are the perfect representation of YVR's role in the global supply chain. Let's switch gears. Meet Mike Tedeschi. Mike is a geologist and he lives here in Vancouver where he consults for global mining exploration firms. He's our road warrior, a commuting champion. But unlike your commute, or mine, which may include the C-Bus, Canada Line, or the Lionsgate Bridge, Mike commutes by air through YVR to work in the Yukon. A typical work week for Mike, and hundreds of other YVR road warriors, may include a 2-week stint in a northern mine, followed by 5 days back in the big city, and then cycles like that continue month after month. Without air connections, businesses in the north would find it difficult to attract skilled people. The Mining Association of BC forecasts that we'll need almost 17,000 workers in the next 10 years. So air service through YVR gives Canada's resource industry a bigger, more attractive pool from which to hire skilled people. This will come as no surprise to many of you, but the mining sector is very important to BC, contributing 2% of the province's GDP. Did you know that YVR alone contributes 1%? Not many know that the airport alone is half as big as mining. At YVR, we strive to make travel for road warriors like Mike, who need to get to work fast, efficient, pleasant, and safe, and we have spent millions on terminal systems, baggage systems, and airside systems to make this happen. However, a huge factor in getting travelers like Mike from the parking lot to the plane in a timely fashion is pre-board security screening. And the Airport Authority does not control this security screening. CATSA, the Canadian Air Transport Security Authority, is in charge of that. Now, I worked at YVR when CATSA was first introduced, and after much national debate, the promise was the government would take money from passengers in the form of a tax on the ticket and provide the screening service. The local CATSA team here at YVR does its best, but now their budgets are being cut and passengers like Mike are starting to feel the effects. We need the government to provide more funding and or make CATSA more efficient in order to keep its promise and continue investing in this essential service, especially to keep up with our expected growth. If these cuts continue, our fear is that time-pressed road warriors like Mike and many others will be stuck in lineups, bags won't make planes, which is not an ideal scenario when you're trying to grow as a global hub and remain competitive. While south of the border airports like Bellingham and SeaTac can sometimes beat us on price, they can't beat us on service. So fast and efficient CATSA screening is a very important competitive issue for us and for the road warriors that rely on us. Now let's move from road warriors to scholars. This is Nalini Singh. She's in the second year of a 2-year program at Thompson Rivers University. By happy coincidence, Kamloops, the cultural and political heart of the province, is my hometown. And Vantage Airport Group operates Kamloops Airport. Nalini is one of more than 33,500 international students who come from more than 100 countries worldwide to study in BC every year. She is joined by some 2,600 other international students at TRU alone. International students spend more than $2 billion annually on tuition, accommodation, food, and other essential items like coffee, craft dinner, and beer. Not only do international students benefit from the experience of studying and living in beautiful BC, but they uniquely enrich the lives of fellow students in their new local communities. And we can't underestimate the multiplier effects. International students draw their families to visit while they're here and in future years. Now, Nalini's from Mumbai and studying accounting at TRU. She'll graduate next spring. With previous educational and work experience in finance, Nalini had plenty of options about where to study. She picked BC because of its reputation as a great place to live, and TRU because it has a fantastic co-op program. She also said she was excited to see snow for the first time. But she didn't pick BC because of its air connections. To get from Mumbai to BC, Nalini had to make a number of connections because we don't have direct service to India yet. But it is true that Nalini and her fellow foreign students at TRU would have had to connect through YVR to get to Kamloops. As many of you know, when you're new to a foreign country and a foreign airport, connections can be very stressful. We're working hard to make these connections faster, simpler, and a lot less intimidating with a combination of new facilities and more feet on the floor. That's friendly smiles and helping hands offered by our customer care staff and more than 450 Green Coat volunteers. Collectively, these employees and volunteers speak 43 different languages and answer thousands of inquiries per day, over 800,000 last year alone that we measured. That's a lot of directions. Our care for every customer extends to all aspects of the passenger experience, from curb to cabin. We're also building new facilities worth several $100 million just to help future passengers, students like Nalini included, enjoy expedited connections for international to domestic flights, so the entire process takes place in less than 60 minutes. YVR's current air service economy connects to 49% of the global economy. That's not enough. We have some big gaps. The BC Council for International Education notes that we could attract more international students from markets in the Middle East, South America, and Southeast Asia if airline partners could offer nonstop air service. In early October, I was in Las Vegas for Roots 2013, which is the biggest air service and airport convention in the world. And once again, YVR had a conversation with a certain Mideastern airline. This airline was voted the best airline in the world last year, and they want to fly to Vancouver, the best airport in North America. This sounds like a simple business case, doesn't it? We have the infrastructure and the market demand for their business. But we can't roll out the welcome mat because of restrictive federal air policy, which allows Qatar Airlines to fly 3 times per week to Montreal, Etihad to fly 3 times per week to Toronto, and Emirates to also operate 3 flights per week to Toronto. None of these airlines are allowed to fly to Vancouver at all. You may be saying, is that really unfair? And yes, I think it is. We're not asking for unrestricted open skies. We're not advocating one-sided deals. Of course, these bilaterals must be reciprocal, and they can be. We just want our fair share of the traffic. We got a big win earlier this year when an agreement between Iceland and Canada took effect. We recently announced that Icelandair will run twice weekly seasonal service between YVR and Reykjavik, Iceland. With this new service, Nalini may find an accounting job for an Iceland mining company. And jealous fruits, cherries may make it into a Viking feast. Or you may fly to Glasgow or to Paris through Reykjavik because that's your fastest connection, all because the bilaterals opened up. Restrictive air policies affect everyone in this room. So, if YVR skies were less restrictive, where would you fly from YVR? We want to know. There's a kind of a Ninja Star card on your table. You're not supposed to throw them around, Graydon. Please take a look at it. The tweet address is on the back. Tweet us with what you think our next destination would, could, or should be. And with that, I'd like to relate the last of our stories. Please meet Mr. and Mrs. Ho, tourists and intrepid adventurers eager to experience the best that BC has to offer. We recently did some market research in China and found that 49% of the people we surveyed said they would like to visit Vancouver in the next 2 years, which is exactly what Mr. and Mrs. Ho just did. Like many first-time visitors, not to mention locals returning home from abroad, the Hos were wowed by our beautiful airport. The aquarium, the art collection, and the West Coast design of the terminal, all of this combines to create the unique sense of place I mentioned earlier. They got directions from the BC Visitors Centre and international arrivals and headed downtown on the Canada Line. Canada Line, by the way, one of the most important community investments we've ever made for passengers, for employees, for our environmental impact as an airport that strives to operate sustainably. Since it opened in 2009, the Canada Line has been wildly popular, carrying thousands of people, at least 17% of airport employees and passengers coming to Sea Island at the airport every day. The Hos enjoyed their visit to Metro Vancouver. They explored Richmond's Steveston Village and its great seafood, strolled along Gastown's cobbled streets, toured our local rainforest, up close at the world-famous Capilano Suspension Bridge. They flew to YVR from Guangzhou on China Southern, a relatively new service that celebrated its 2nd anniversary this year. YVR was the first and remains the only Canadian nonstop destination served by China Southern. Independent research shows that a new daily international flight generates between 150 and 200 direct jobs at the airport, servicing the plane, its passengers, and cargo. We also found that this same new flight supports another 300 to 400 direct jobs in the tourism sector, hotels, restaurants, tour companies, and local attractions. To illustrate that, in just a single day, the host connected with an airport green coat volunteer, hotel concierge, housekeeping staff, taxi driver, barista at the coffee shop, trolley driver, Capilano Suspension Bridge tour guide, tram operator at Grouse Mountain, Gastown souvenir shop owner, server at the Stephen Fish and Chip shop, the waitress and the chef who prepared their Monty Mushroom Burger at White Spot, and many others who make their living in Metro Vancouver's tourism industry. So allow me to drive this point home one more time. One daily international flight from China creates between 450 to 600 direct jobs in BC. A new nonstop flight makes it easier for tourists like the host to access all that beautiful BC has to offer. We've seen this happen before. When Air New Zealand began nonstop service to Vancouver in 2007, about 20,000 New Zealanders visited BC every year. That number jumped to 30,000 a year with the advent of the new service. We saw it again this summer. When Lufthansa began seasonal nonstop service to Munich, German tourists to BC jumped by 15% in the first month alone. And we know that travelers have choices, but if it's easier to get to BC, they will come here and we will all benefit. So let's recap. We want the federal government to open our skies, keep funding for passenger screening, and finally, for my last request, simplify the visa process. Canada's visa application process is onerous. Among the issues, too many forms, language barriers, and even having to surrender your original documentation. Canada is working on this. It's considering a 10-year multiple entry visa. Wait times for a visa in China have gone from 2 months to an average of 16 days, now that part of the process is online. But our competition is beating us. If international travelers have a choice between San Francisco and Vancouver, they're going to pick the destination with the quickest visa turnaround time, and it's not us. It took the host 16 days to get their Canadian visas, but if they looked into it, they would have discovered they could go to get the US visas in just 4 days. Now here's a crazy thought. Why couldn't you enter Canada with a US visa, and vice versa? Is there that much difference between the two countries' processes and desired outcomes? Food for thought. It all comes down to easy connections. What Mike, Nalini, Mr. and Mrs. Ho, and our BC Cherries all have in common is their paths cross at YVR, the place that makes connections work. And to support their journeys, 23,600 people have jobs at YVR, from ground handlers and airport ops officers to customs agents, cleaning staff, airside emergency responders, accountants, and one airport CEO, for which I'm very grateful. Hopefully my requests for the government don't sound too strident, given what they've done for the Canadian airport model and for our ongoing partnership. And I know that we share a vision to make BC and Canada economically vibrant and competitive. But I also believe we can agree on policy changes that are actually far simpler than the decades-old change that was the National Airports Policy. The changes we seek today don't cost any money. These changes will build global connections, create local jobs, and invest in our communities. YVR's, the Lower Mainland, and British Columbia's best years are ahead of us. We're on the cusp of global greatness, connecting BC to the world, adding millions more passengers and thousands of jobs. We just need the government to remove these impediments to trade. At the heart of this extraordinary opportunity and operation is the Airport Authority itself, a company whose sole reason for being is to enable these connections to work, to provide the runways, the taxiways, the terminals, the baggage systems, the ground access, and expertise which keeps it all working safely 24 hours a day, every day, in sun, rain, and fog. So now, we get to see all these stories converge at the best airport in North America. Ladies and gentlemen, here's one day in the life of YVR, providing connections that work. Well, I hope the stories I've shared today bring to life YVR's importance as a community asset, an economic driver, and a job creator. I commend the Vancouver Board of Trade and the Richmond Chamber of Commerce for getting a joint policy resolution entitled Improving Air Access for the Benefit of the National Economy adopted at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce Annual General Meeting in Kelowna earlier this month. I'd also like to recognize a few people that allowed me to share their stories. Some are in the room and others are watching online. Thanks to David Geen and the team at Jealous Fruits in Lake Country, BC. Christine Dendy from the BC Cherry Growers Association. Mike Tedeschi, our geologist. Student Nalini Singh, Mike Henniger, and the international marketing team from Thompson Rivers University. That's in Kamloops, in case you missed that. Sue Kafka from the Capilano Suspension Bridge. David Martin and Brian Appleby, the video production team at Hyphen Communications. And executive chef Ned Bell and the fantastic team at the Four Seasons for our marvelous lunch and experience here today. There are also a number of other people from YVR, the entire airport, way too many to name. But I invite them to stand, please. Everybody who works at YVR, connected to YVR, please stand up. Don't be shy. Don't be shy. It's an outstanding team, and you all play a part in making YVR's connection to the world for BC. Thank you very much. And one last order of business. I hope you had some fun with the gears on the handcrafted box at your tables. I noticed at the head table we didn't even bother putting the gears together. Anyway, one of you at each table has the chance to take this centerpiece and its delicious contents home. So, using the honor system, I invite you to do this at each table. The centerpiece will be awarded to the person at each table who, what else, is next to fly out of YVR. So finally, okay, I think I'm going to have to use I'm going to have to use some Liverpudlian on you. All right, calm down, calm down. Finally, once again, thanks to the Board of Trade for having me. Thanks to all of you for listening. I look forward to any questions you might have.
Well, thank you very much. I think Nalini's in the room. Is she in the room? Do you want to stand up, Nalini? There we go. Welcome. You're reading one of my favorite books, Cost Accounting. Very good, very good. We have a chance here for a couple of questions. I think some people are circulating. Please hold up your cards and we'll try and get to a few of them. We know time's running a little tight, but we will try and get you out of here in about 10 minutes. But I do want to take this opportunity to make sure we ask a couple of questions. There's one that came through. You mentioned there's currently 75 flights a week from YVR to China and Hong Kong, more than any other North American airport. Any sense on what it could be?
Oh, what the total could be?
Yes.
Well, you know, this is exciting because the scale of the opportunity is almost too big to grasp. In the next 6.5 years, there'll be 750 million more middle-class Asians, many of whom will be in China. Think about that number, 750 million. You know, I've done some basic math. If we could get 0.24 of 1%, be another 5 million passengers. It's thousands of jobs. So sometimes I worry that somebody's going to get it. Suddenly we're going to have all these bilaterals and we will be racing to keep up, which would be a quality problem.
Here's a good one. What are the restrictive air policies in place for? The facts presented suggest a no-brainer. Good question, Devlin.
Well, you know, I think they involve, I mean, we're not saying it's simple because they involve trade treaties with other countries. I just think we're behind. I can't give you the exact number. We're behind in these more open trade treaties. And it's the way the world is going. Instead of being protectionist, get out there and compete. You know, I'll just relate a quick story from when I first started at YVR. In 1996, you could fly to exactly 6 destinations in the U.S. from Vancouver because of the air bilaterals. Open Skies came in, and I know Air Canada was worried about it. They have actually been the single airline to benefit the most from the Open Skies Treaty with the U.S. And now you can fly to 28 destinations in the U.S. and I think it should probably be 36. So there's reasons for them in the past. They are difficult to accomplish, but they open up business.
Thank you for that. Another one is, what can YVR do to be more competitive with the lower fare and better route options of airports south of the border?
It's a question that I get asked a lot, especially on radio shows. And the fact is, after 4 months of intensive study, I realized that, yeah, they're a competitor and they're taking some traffic away from us, but they're also a complementary product. It's the ultra-low-cost market, which I'm very familiar with from Liverpool, is a market that we're just not in. And we can't compete on price. So we compete on value. Another thing, once you fly to Hawaii a couple of times and you have to pay for everything and the parking is not as good, the whole experience isn't as good, we believe you'll come back. Plus, your 15th wedding anniversary when you're taking your wife to Paris, you're coming to YVR. And eventually, over time, I think we stimulate the market and more people to fly out of YVR. I can't compete on price. The American system is just very different. Classic example, we pay $40 million in rent, they get their runway built by funds from the federal government. So it's just a very different system. I would just leave you with this one thought. I don't know how long that system lasts.
You mentioned transfers without visa program and why this is important to the future expansion of YVR. Maybe you can just expand on that a little bit and give us some more insight.
Sure. What it would allow is for, say, Chinese mining people or people who just want to travel to South America to fly through YVR but not actually enter Canada. Right now they would have to get a visa for Canada, for example, and Brazil or for Peru or Chile. And that's very onerous. You don't want to do that. So what we would do is we would build a part of the terminal that is sterile and not really technically part of Canada from a customs point of view. They wouldn't know that. There would be duty-free and spas and have a shower and restaurants, but they would actually transit from their Chinese flight onto, say, Land Chile or Air Canada flying down to South America. And there's thousands and thousands of people that want to do that. And we've had airlines say, look, I will put an aircraft in YVR if you can get that. And that's just as simple as let's give it a try, and we can bring those jobs in a couple of years.
Thank you. I think we have time for about one more. As Southeast Asia economics continue to grow, will YVR be developing partnerships with airlines to create direct flights to capital cities such as Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Singapore?
Absolutely love to. It's all about the air bilaterals. For example, right now we're not allowed to fly directly to Thailand, and I wonder sometimes why that is there, and open up those bilaterals. We'd be happy to take all comers.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for questions today. Again, Craig, thank you very much for that informative speech and insights that you have. We have a small parting and token of our appreciation. These are very special if you wear them when you need big decisions or when you need some luck. I think they'll work. They're V-bot cufflinks, so here you go.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.